Hey guys, Mike here. Welcome back to my channel. I just finished watching episode 3 of the new season of South Park, and because my last video did really well for my channel, and if you haven't watched it yet, definitely go and watch that, other videos, and subscribe to my channel, I decided I want to do a video like that for every episode of South Park for the rest of the season and hopefully get some more traction based on that. And I think this week's episode, Japanese Toilets, is much less clear with its satirical message. It definitely feels like a more neutral episode of South Park, particularly in comparison to last week's episode, which I would say had pretty aggressively blatant satire about Harry and Meghan. It was very obvious what the messaging was about, and it felt like the show making quite a deliberate point about Harry and Meghan and the wider royal family and that entire scandal. This episode I felt like had a few different themes, and I wasn't particularly sure what the key message was of all this, but I still thought there was some substance in here to talk about. But yeah, definitely a much less pointed and much more subtle episode than last week's, which is perfectly fine for me. I don't mind episodes of South Parks that are a bit more kind of free-flowing and not as just like in-your-face current-day satire. But here's what I kind of got out of this week's episode. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 key thematic pieces of satire that are going on here with the Japanese toilets angle, and I think the first one is maybe unpacking and looking at the West's fetishization or glamorizing of a lot of Asian cultures, particularly Japan, and I feel like the Japanese toilet is the perfect metaphor for that. I feel like a lot of people that I know, including myself, have been to Japan and like come back being like, wow, Japan's so amazing, man, you've got to go there. Oh, they do everything different. It's so weird and wacky, but it's just so better. Why aren't we more like them? The trains, the toilets, the food, everything is way better, right? And for most people who do go over to Japan, the one thing that we notice is how superior their toilets are to us, right? They're all electronic, they have bidets, they don't really need toilet paper as much, they are heated on the seat. Oh, it is pure comfort. And I think that is the perfect analogy for like Western people going to places like Japan and coming back thinking like, wow, I'm so cultured now, this was amazing. It kind of sends all of that up. And also just the way we use a lot of Japanese products in our lives. I think Randy buying this toilet because he's kind of sold on the idea of this toilet just being the ultimate product. And they really send this up. It's quite a funny dichotomy between the fact that Randy is relieving his bowels and the sounds associated with that, with the really relaxing Japanese toilet music that he ends up singing along to in one of the funniest laugh out loud moments of the episode.
Randy?
Of course, this leads maybe into the second biggest satirical point in this episode, which is, I guess, to do with wealth or people's efforts in modern society to showcase how good their lives are. And I think the toilet again serves as a metaphor for this. We are in such a self-indulgent culture now, such a projection culture. Our entire lives become brands, especially with social media. And this was touched upon in last week's episode with the company that works on rebranding people and reinventing their brands. Often it is being a victim, which seems to be a big thing on online culture now. But yeah, I think this whole imagery thing of curating this brand for yourself online that I think most people, particularly those of us who are in our late 20s who grew up with social media for the first time, we have been victim to or are still part of this game. And Randy buying this toilet, which is a super expensive, I think, $10,000 toilet that he installs into the house, and using it and enjoying this, and it isn't enough for him to just have the toilet. He has to actually call everyone in South Park and tell them that he has this toilet, tell them how good it is, which gets back to Stan's friends at school who begin calling him Richie Rich and making fun of how wealthy his family is to be able to afford this toilet, which leads you to think, is it more about the comfort of the toilet or is it more about telling everyone everyone that you made a $10,000 purchase, which is so prevalent in our society now. People posting pictures of the glamorous holidays they're on, taking pictures of the hotels they're staying at, the pools they're in, the cars they're in, all of these things, and there's no real backing information behind it. We don't know what these things are, how they got them, whether it is purchased or if they're just hiring them, renting it. Everyone is just trying to showcase how incredible their lives are compared to everyone else, when really, and ironically, we never really showcase any of the boring parts of life, like going to work or relieving our bowels, perhaps, which is maybe where the toilet metaphor comes back into it. That this going to the toilet is like the least glamorous thing, but somehow it becomes the most glamorous thing to Randy. Because we are all doing that every day. Every single one of us is doing those things every day, but none of us are posting about it online or trying to gloat about it. There are a few other little nods to current pop culture, some of which I really would have liked to have been explored more, particularly the references to Hogwarts Legacy, the new Harry Potter-based video game. Stan is playing it on PlayStation 5 and it is currently not released on PlayStation 4, so because Stan has the newest, most up-to-date model of PlayStation, he can play that game.
See, Stan, you gotta choose if you want to be in Gryffindor or Slytherin.
Yeah, can I do it?
Yeah, so you gotta fight these fairy guys.
Randy?
Well, of course, it's actually Randy that's playing most of the game. And this happened at the start of the episode, and I really thought they were going to go there with the whole Hogwarts Legacy controversy and J.K. Rowling and transphobia and all of this online discourse around whether buying Hogwarts Legacy makes you transphobic, which, by the way, it doesn't, just in case you were wondering my perspective on it. But it was kind of just more to weigh into this idea that the Marsh family have more money and therefore can afford better things than other people, and then rub that into other people to show them what a glamorous life they're living. And then you have the most blatant satire and the most blatant point, I suppose, being made, which leads into both number 3 and number 4 on my list. Of course, the usage of toilet paper in Western civilization, which I think we can all agree is kind of weird, and leaning back into that going to Japan thing when you discover a bidet for the first time and you realize that toilet paper isn't really the most hygienic way to clean up down there. And in this episode, Jimmy really makes that point. Like, rubbing bacteria around in that area is just detrimental to our health. And why do we in the West use toilet paper? Why do we use it when people in a lot of Asian countries and other countries around the world use bidets and actually use water for their anal hygiene?
We're told to wash our hands, wear masks in crowds, but for some reason when it comes to wiping our ass, we're told to do it with this little piece of paper.
I think this is a really fun exploration because I think, particularly in the last few years, you hear about this a lot. Maybe as people are traveling more and experiencing the wonders of the bidet, people are coming back, particularly men, for reasons I won't state, but I think a lot of us are like, why am I not using water here? And I think that's just a fun point to focus on this episode that isn't really related, as far as I can tell, to any current social issue or thing going on. It's just a funny observation about using toilet paper and whether or not that is the most hygienic method of cleaning up. And of course that leads into the 4th point that maybe is a stretch for me, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I wondered if it was a send-up of conspiracy theorists and misinformation and cover-ups and government cover-ups and everything like that, of course, because it becomes clear from Jimmy that toilet paper is a multi-billion-dollar company around the world, and the average American uses however many toilet paper rolls a year. And of course, Randy stops seeing his doctor because he stops getting hemorrhoids because he's no longer using toilet paper and rubbing paper on that part of his body. And the doctor gets noticeably angry and tries to destroy the toilet because I suppose it is putting him out of business, which leads Stan to understand that there is a wider conspiracy here, that the reason bidets are not making their way into the West is because the toilet paper industry is so profitable for so many people that they will do anything to cover it up.
Whoa, hey! You gotta ruin Tuscany! Stop it! I hate you!
Hence why Randy ends up getting shot, going to hospital, and then by the end of the episode, adamantly interrupting Stan's exposure of the truth to apologize to everyone in South Park and saying that toilet paper is great and nothing is wrong with it, and getting the entire town to apologize.
Japanese toilets are totally unnecessary, and in case anyone else is listening, I think all of South Park would like to apologize.
Now, on this group apology, when Randy directly looks at the camera, I wondered if this was a response possibly to the Harry and Meghan fallout. That was undoubtedly one of the greatest amounts of publicity that South Park has had in a long time. I mean, it's a very successful show, but I don't think I've ever seen it being talked about on a worldwide scale like that before.
Let's take a little look at South Park, just because it makes me howl with laughter every time I look at it.
Popular animated series South Park could face legal action following last week's episode attacking a royal couple.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have reportedly instructed their lawyers to investigate taking on one of the world's most popular and edgy cartoon series.
What are you're suing South Park,
kick that
really?
hornet's nest.
Or at least for quite some time. Other moments that come to mind were the episode with Tom Cruise. I remember that being quite big news. And also, particularly here in Australia, the episode that featured Steve Irwin in Hell. I remember that being a big deal here because it was not long after Steve Irwin died. Maybe even the censorship episodes in episode 200 and 201 with the whole depicting Muhammad thing, they were pretty big, but you know, for a while, that Meghan and Harry thing was huge, and I wondered if Randy saying, getting everyone at South Park to say sorry and looking at the camera saying, sorry, don't worry about it, let's move on, was them being like, all right, we're not going to touch that again, we did our point, that's it, we're doing it. But then I don't feel like that fit with the rest of the narrative of the story, and I wondered if it was more just a reflection of how people will cover up the truth out of fear. Randy got shot, and now he's like, I got shot, let's just keep covering this up, I don't want to have to get into any more trouble. And how authority and power kind of manipulate the everyday person from speaking up against injustices in the world and mistruths and misinformation and all the rest of it. Maybe that's me micro-analyzing it a little bit too much and it was just a funny episode about toilet paper, but I guess for me, as someone who likes to analyze pop culture, and I do this a bit on my podcast and on my videos here on my channel, which are excerpts from my podcast, I feel as though there is inherent meaning and intent behind any piece of media that you engage with, and you can find those meanings by unpacking it in this way. And those are kind of like the four things I took out of this one. 1, critiquing the fetishization of various Asian countries here in the West. 2, critiquing our hygiene. 3, critiquing wealth and this self-image culture that we have, that we foster our own brands. And 4, speaking to conspiracy theories, authorities with power, and fear for the everyday person to speak up against injustices. What did you think? Let me know in the comments below. Give the video a thumbs up if you can. Subscribe. Watch the video I did on the last South Park episode and subscribe so you get next week's one as well. And check out a bunch of my pop culture videos on my channel. I do a bunch of podcasts and I cut clips from it on my channel, but then sometimes I just do clips just for YouTube like this one. Guys, I will see you in the next video. Can't wait for the next episode. Overall, I enjoyed this one a fair bit. It was a good laugh, and yeah, see you later.